Okay, so our facilitator, our instructor tonight for Veg Club is Carol Appenzeller. Carol thinks more about growing food than most people should, and that just makes me so happy. I love every time I say that. I just love saying that. Anyway, it's to our benefit. She's been growing vegetables for 3 decades, half of which that time is spent on Bainbridge Island. She has the equivalent of 33 4-by-8-foot garden beds on her 1/4-acre lot, which is an inspiration for every single vegetable gardener in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome, Carol. Take it away.
Thank you, John, for that extreme intro, a flattering intro. Thank you. I'm glad you're all here. Thank you so much for coming, Veg Club people, Veg Clubbers, as I like to say, but that's kind of a gruesome image. Recently, we've had a couple of kind of mixed sunny days, huh? So I guess the joke that I have posted right now that our February weather has been delayed and delivered in May is maybe going to break. Maybe it's not true. Today we're talking about pests and diseases, just kind of like a rogues gallery of the most common ones that you'll see. And we'll try to run through them quickly. And as I do so, I hope that you will say, or I hope that you'll let us know if you disagree with something, or if you have something that really works for you. Definitely, I would love to hear about it, either at the time that we're talking about that particular disease, or we'll do breaks every once in a while and I'll ask if you have anything to add. And I'd also like you to consider a question, because I've been doing monologues kind of, and it would be lovely to hear from people. I always wonder if the timing's going to be right, but I wonder if you would consider this question. How do you describe yourself as a gardener? And it could be any way, and then maybe a sentence about why you describe yourself that way. And you could tell us your name too, in case we can't see. So that would be great. And we're not going to do it right this minute. We'll give you time to think about it, and then then we'll go on to from there. We'll stop every once in a while. Oh, if you missed a session, you can watch the videos. They are in the resource page. The resource page is a link that John is going to put into the chat. He also puts almost all of the links from the resource page directly into the chat, but you can always go to that resource page even if you don't get them. So here we go. Oh, and we're going to talk about microbes and bugs. So pests and the great ones that help us out. And the pest ones, they're all part of the ecosystem too. So what are they? Well, they get the same things that we get. They don't get the same viruses, but they get viruses and fungus and bacteria, and they have parasites and all kinds of things like that. So we're just going to go through, and previous sessions, I either had a big project like how to use lights, or sort of an exploration into the holistic ideas of your soil. And this is a little different. The first part of this is just the rogues gallery of pests of every type. And then we get to how to know and attract our beneficial predatory bugs. So not just the pollinators. So I'm excited about that part in particular. So we're going to start with bugs. And bugs, I mean insects and other crunchy-bodied organisms that are like mites. Those aren't insects, spiders, and even slugs and snails. So here's a favorite, the cabbage looper. How many cabbage loopers are in the upper left corner? I think there are 2, and one is lying on the spine on the center of the leaf, because that's what they do. It's from 2 organisms at least. One is a moth, those are the moth eggs, and the other one is the cabbage white butterfly that's fluttering through your garden all the time, and its eggs look like that. So what can you do about them? Of course, we always can hand pick them, but we can remember a few things. One is that they hide on the spine of the leaf, on the midrib, and the other one is that they're much smaller than this when they start out, so you can catch them smaller. And another is that if you look at the leaves that are chewed, find the innermost leaf that's chewed, look for them on there, but also look inward, because they're not being polite and finishing the leaf before they move in to a newer leaf. So you can look all over the place. Yeah, one thing I would say about removing the leaves, if I found these on a brassica, anything related to a cabbage or kale and all that, I would probably assume that those are cabbage white butterfly eggs. But if I found them on a cherry tree or another plant, I would not. I would maybe think that they are ladybug eggs. So I don't want you to wipe all the ladybug legs off of everything. What else can you do about these? You can certainly use a row cover if you want to. Row cover is, give me a link. This stuff, it's a looks like tissue paper, but it's fabric. And the one that I'm recommending to you right now is much lighter than this. You can really see through it. You can water through these if you've never used them. They have heavy ones that really warm things up, so you can frost protect in the fall and winter. But I really like the AG15, which is Agribon brand. There's also Remesh. Agribon has an online reputation of being a little tougher, but I use the Agribon AG15 because it's super light, so it doesn't hold that summer heat in because I don't really want it to. And it lets 90% of the light through because I want those carrots growing or whatever it is. I want to give them as much light as possible, and you roll water right through it. Arbico is an interesting company. You can see they sell beneficial insects, and they also sell biotic pest control, which is like they'll sell you bacteria, packets of bacteria and things like that, that can help you. That's also the link for these things is in the resource page. My last thing that I would say about this is if the yellow jackets are not somewhere where I'm going to drag the hose across their nest in the ground and get stung, or it's over my door or something, if it's on that tree on the corner, or even way up at the top of my eaves, I had one in the top of my second story eaves, and I left it there, and I've never had such a clean garden because those yellow jackets and other wasps that are bobbing around or going from plant to plant to plant in your garden, they are taking food back for their babies. And I just love that they're cleaning my garden for me. So that's cabbage loopers. Does anybody have anything to say about any cabbage looper tips?
No, but this is Cindy, a different question. Do they look like aphids?
Cabbage loopers?
Yeah.
The thing that eats your plants.
Oh, it's the
looks
green
like
thing, not
that.
okay.
Yes, and that's one of them. Yeah, that's what they look like.
But
And
the middle slide shows that's the eggs that before they hatch. Is that
that's
it?
the eggs before they hatch. This is from the cabbage white butterfly, and these are from the moth that produces a similar worm, a similar caterpillar.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
And you can kill them with BT. That was a thing 25 years ago, I think, that it's the Bacillus thuringiensis. But it kills anything that's a butterfly. So it just kills Lepidoptera. So I don't recommend that. Yeah, so that's why I'm not recommending it. Cutworm is another favorite. This is a little baby cutworm, and it just makes a meal right through the stem of a plant, usually a seedling, and then it lies down and takes a nap. And it doesn't even eat the rest of it, the ingrate. This is what it turns into as an adult. And here it is as a teenager. And these don't crawl around, but I find them in my beds because I have what used to be a lawn still around my beds, and cutworm likes grasses. But I find these in my bed. When I dig a 4x8 bed, I'm probably going to find one. I might even find two, either the worm or the pupa. This is actually the larva in the pupa. And it doesn't really bother me because in 16 years that I've been here, the number of times that I have ever had anything cut off by one of these guys is one time. So I actually just take whatever I find and put it out on the bed where the robins can really see it and walk off and do something else. And those hungry robins have been trained to, they'll watch you from the fence post when you turn soil because it smells like food to them. So yeah, if you have a cutworm problem and you really are concerned about your starts, you can take about 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches of a toilet roll. And when you put your starts in the soil, you can plant them inside that toilet roll, work the toilet roll maybe 1/2 inch into the soil so that it's a little bit stable, and that'll stop those cutworms, those cutworm babies. Anybody have cutworm tips? I'm just going to say right now, you can take one of these pupa and a little bit of soil, put it in a jar with a breathing lid on top of it, you know, a holes perforated lid, and it will turn into the moth, and it makes a little science project for the kids. I just did it for myself because I wanted to see it happen. Leaf miners. Do you have leaf miners? They love spinach, chard, and beets. And it looks like this. And what has happened is the little larva that is it's a fly egg, and the fly lays these underneath the leaf, and then they can bore in. And this is a cross section of the leaf. Isn't it organized and beautiful? This is actually an art piece, but this is really what it looks like. The larva has eaten out the inside of the leaf. So I try not to let it get this far, because this might actually be one that has been eaten enough that the larva matured and crawled back out of the leaf and is going to attack other leaves. I try to find them when they are smaller patches. Like here's a really small patch, but no matter what, I put my finger underneath the leaf and my thumb on top and go pinch, 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 pinch. And I flatten all of it, including the green margin, because that's where the little critter is munching, is at the green margin. It might be in the middle, you know, traversing from one side to the other, but we want to smush it before it comes out. So that is the leaf miner tip that I have. Whoa. Here's carrot rust fly. If your carrots look like this, you have carrot rust fly. And I went over this before, but a good plan for carrot rust fly is, even if you don't cover other plants, because I don't cover other plants with Remesh or, you know, a row cover, because I want to see my garden. But carrots in the west of Washington, it's not a problem in the rest of the country, but we have carrot rust fly. It's a good environment for it. So what you can do is don't thin your carrots before you put, I should say, wait until your carrots are 2 inches tall, let's say, to thin them. And then before you thin them and before you weed the bed, I would just leave it all alone. And then right before you do it, get ready to put your Remesh on, your row cover on. And you want a piece that is the width and length of your bed, but add 3 feet to the width and 3 feet to the length, because you want it to be able to be billowing up when the carrots grow. So we're going to cut straight down into the soil, about 4 inches down into the soil, all the way around the bed. And then all in one session, uninterrupted, we're going to get ready, and you're going to weed the bed and disturb the soil surface just a little bit around the carrots, and then thin the carrots to 1 to 3 inches apart, closer to 2 or 3 if you want bigger carrots. And then you're going to poke the corners of the row cover into the corners of that slot you cut, and then pleat the rest of it in. So you've tucked it into the slot. You can also dig a ditch, put the row cover in the ditch and cover it up. But I find that that takes up garden space. Like if I have a 4x8 bed, I don't want to use that much space. And you can water right through the ag cloth. And the reason that we want to get the cover on as soon after you weed and thin is because when you're weeding and thinning carrots, you can smell that carrot top, the carrot top smell. So can the fly, and they will come. So we're trying to be really speedy, but whenever we touch them. And if you see flies under the cover in the following days, because they do sometimes get under there, they're going to be perched upside down inside the row cover, and they're not expecting you to come from the direction of their feet. So it's not hard to just walk up to them and grab them really fast and pinch them. Because if you have trapped flies in there, then you're just going to make a little fly biome, right? If you have really bad pressure for this, you could even do it before your carrots are 2 inches tall. You could cover them up without thinning or weeding, and then uncover them and thin and weed and cover them back up. But I think the 2 inches is 2 to 4 inches even is okay most of the time. Does anybody have any tips for the ones that I've gone over so far? Or tipless or questions or anything? Okay. Okay, root knot nematodes. I was not sure how you wanted this. I don't know if it's very common. This is the worst example I've ever seen over here. But sometimes you'll see carrots with a little bit of little bit of warts on them, and they might also be split, and it's caused by this guy. Now, nematodes are not bad. They're not any worse than a category of any other kind of animal. It's just some of them cause us problems, and some of them actually help us. So this is a little roundworm, and a great thing to do is don't grow carrots. If you have this, move your carrots to a different place, a different bed, because these nematodes are not super mobile in the soil. So you can move those carrots. Crab meal has chitin in it. Anything with an exoskeleton is made of chitin. And the chitin encourages a bacterium to grow that discourages roundworms, which is another name for nematodes. Unfortunately, whenever you discourage nematodes, you discourage the bad ones and the good ones. But there is current research into a fungus that just attacks the ones that make root knot. So that's nice. There is this Monterey product. It's organic approved. It's Sapodilla tree extract, and it suppresses all nematodes. So I wouldn't put it everywhere, but if I were desperate for good carrots and I were really having a problem, then you can buy that. You can buy it around here. Yeah, but if you're trying to preserve your nematodes, you might want to not want to do that. This is, I've shown this already twice, but these are slug tips. Sorry. Tips for slugs. Bigger starts, keep them off the ground. Beer traps. You can see how to do beer traps in the March recording. I don't mulch little seedlings, water in the morning so the soil surface dries out. That's very effective. Iron phosphate is not pet safe necessarily, and it's not great for soil life. They thought it was when it first came out, but it isn't. We've realized it's not. And we can also encourage predatory insects, which is fun. And we're going to learn about that at the end. Does anybody have slug tips? More things? I heard a couple of times ago, somebody said, a friend swears by diatomaceous earth, which I don't use it for that, but that's an interesting thing. I think you have to keep it dry for that to work, but it would really work well if it were dry. Okay, cabbage root maggot. This is like all the slides to depress you. If you have something related to a cabbage and it's wilting and it just won't respond to watering, you might want to carefully dig out the root ball and see if it has these little guys. They are root maggots. They are a fly. They lay their egg in the soil and it goes down into the roots. You can keep your starts. If you have starts, sometimes they'll get infected. You can keep those covered in a row cover, even underneath the cells. So you just wrap them and you can water right through. And you can cover your in-ground plants if you want to. You do have to bury the edges of that, just like we did for carrots. But these collars are things that have been traditionally used to keep plants safe. This one happens to be made out of tar paper because we tend to think that tar paper is more discouraging because it's, impregnated with some harsh chemicals. But people use cardboard as well, or paper plates or whatever. You just have to have slits around the trunk of the plant, around the stem of the plant, so that it can expand easily. And then there are also beneficial nematodes that attack cabbage root maggot. And I know a farmer locally who's used it, and I've used it. It seemed to be effective. It's sold by Arbico, and it's called Steinerema feltiae. And this link is also in the resource page. So the nematodes, you'll have to read up on when you want to use them, because you have to use them fairly soon after you get the stuff. They cost you about $40, but they cover a lot of land. And you have to apply them with, in a spray, a hose and a sprayer and things like that, and keep it wet over the next couple of days. Yeah. Aphids. Well, what can I say about aphids? Of course, we're always told to spray them off with a strong blast of water. I find I have to find a particular place, put my hand behind it, and then spray them with the water. Or I just wipe them off But of course, that doesn't work if 300 nasturtium plants have them all over it. It works well if you have them early. Do you see that these don't have wings? For cabbage aphids, certain species of aphids, the first aphids don't have wings, and they only produce winged babies when they're running out of food. So a common advice is to clean off that first plant that gets them. Sometimes one plant will get them kind of bad, or you can even do what's called roguing out, and you just pull it and make sure you get that buried in the middle of the compost pile or something like that. Diatomaceous earth works, but I wouldn't put it everywhere because it kills anything with an exoskeleton. So that's anything, any insects or any spiders and things like that. But if there's one spot, like inside of my celery plants tend to be aphidy, and I can just take a pinch of it and just put it right on the inside. I do that. And if you have aphids on your late summer nasturtiums, so does everybody else. They're black and they're underneath the leaves. You can use those as a trap crop. You can pull those nasturtiums out and bury those in the middle of your compost pile. And those aphids will largely go with the plants. And then there'll be dropped seeds from those nasturtiums, and you push them in the soil because nasturtium seed has to have darkness to germinate. And then you'll get them growing in late summer and into fall. And you have these fresh, lovely nasturtiums. So does anybody have other aphid tips?
Do you ever use neem oil on those?
I haven't used neem oil on them. Neem oil is broad. Do you use neem oil?
Well,
Oops, I'm not hearing you. You accidentally.
I got muted.
Okay, I can hear you now.
I get them, let's see, gosh, I'm trying to think. I've had them a lot in my garden. I get them a lot on my dahlias.
Mm-hmm.
And I have used the neem oil, but I haven't really found it to be all that effective, actually.
Well, that's good, I guess, actually, because it's a very broad pesticide, actually. It can be harmful to any insect that it gets on, including bees and things like that. So I have used it, but not for that. And you want to be careful what's flying around. So you don't want to do it when the bees are around or anything like that. But that's interesting that you tried neem oil and it didn't really help. So we can maybe assemble some more data if other people try it.
Okay.
It gets a lot of positive press, doesn't it? Because it's natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Extract
That's
from
why,
the
that's
tree,
why,
yeah.
yes, that's why I bought it.
Yeah. I tried it for rust and I didn't think it worked very well, but I wasn't super scientific about that. So yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at, we've got past the insects. We're going to look at fungus and bacteria and all those little tiny things. Whoop, up one. So here's one. This is kind of new. We've only had it in the US since 2007, and it has been here not that long in the West. In fact, 2 years ago, I sent a sample to Washington State University, and they were so excited, they didn't even charge me. They just said, thank you, we want to see it because we're keeping track of this new thing. So it's a mold. It's Oomycetes. It's got spores that swim. So it's a fungus, but it has little spores that swim like mammalian reproductive cells. So anything that keeps the plant drier is good. So these three are really good. Water in the morning, space them out. But there's also a resistant variety. And I'll tell you, I think it is appropriate for Bainbridge because a couple years ago, I started asking people, how's your basil? We were doing garden chat, and they said, it was kind of weird. I think it had a problem. It turned yellow, and they described this. So I think we do need it. So I'm going to show you that variety in a sec. But do you see how this yellow, this is the infected area, and it hasn't made it past the veins? That's characteristic of this. Oomycetes can't make it past the vein. It's not invasive enough for that. And you can see it didn't make it past the midrib over here. And then when you turn it over, it might have a little bit of this black stuff. When I turned mine over, it wasn't very well developed. It needs a little bit more humidity than I was giving it. But yeah, you can see this a little bit. You might see a little bit of black spotting. But here's Prospera. Yes, it's a hybrid. If you're an open pollinated only person, this is not for you. DMR just means downy mildew resistant. It's not genetically modified or anything. It's some breeders at Cornell, some agronomy people, bred this in traditional ways so that it is resistant to downy mildew. And it is quite effective. So I know a lot of people, including farmers, who are using it here. And this one comes to us through Johnny's. I think that's in the place you can get it, but I'm not sure. Territorial might have it as well. Oh, this one is the tragic one. So I'll just tell you about it in case somebody next to you at the pea patch has it or someone gets it. You can just have it in your this knowledge in your quiver. This is what it does to the roots, and it just makes them really unsuccessful. This is supposed to be a big field of cabbages. So it lives for a really long time in the soil. And they say don't plant brassicas in that bed again for 7 years, but it can live 20. So it definitely is something to be avoided if you can. Most commonly, it comes on transplants and especially tools. So borrowed tools, you might want to say, you ever heard, if you're borrowing a tool, do you have these symptoms? And you might want to clean the tools. In fact, I would just say clean the tools off really well. And look at this. I thought rubbing alcohol would kill it, but the only things that kill it is really old-fashioned Lysol, not the kind that kills with oxygen or whatever, or 10% bleach solution. So one part bleach to 9 parts water. And I don't like either one of those particularly, but those are the things that kill it. You know, I'm not advocating that we use things that kill all bacteria, but that's what kills it. And you can see here, vinegar doesn't come near killing it, and even 95% rubbing alcohol does not kill it. So you're supposed to immediately take that plant out with the surrounding soil and roots and bag it and throw it away, because the roots will end up rotting, and the rotting ooze from the roots is what spreads the spores. So that's a downer, huh? And here we are with tomatoes and their blights, which are very common here. So there's late blight and there's early blight. Late blight's the thing that caused the potato famine in Ireland. Looks like this on the leaves and looks like that on the stems. It usually has to be going for a while before I see stem symptoms. And it looks like this on the fruit. A lot of us are probably very familiar with this. So where it overwinters is on living tissue. So that includes potatoes. Very often that's potatoes. So I like that the potatoes resprout because I missed one and it comes up, but that is a risk factor for growing a plant that's already got it. And then that can spread to your tomatoes. So that helps if you remove those and you just plant new potatoes. But later on in the season, it can blow in from states away. So it blows 30 miles and infects an area and blows 30 more and infects an area. So roguing out your potatoes can definitely help keep it at bay, even if it's going to come from a warmer state, you know, in September or something. So it spreads really far. So if you decide, oh, I'm just going to take this plant out, and you pull the plant and you're, you know, moving it around, it spreads so easily that it can spread to your other tomatoes. It likes sort of overcast, misty weather. It likes wet weather too. So how can we fight blight? We can do all these things. Certified disease-free potatoes, dig out the volunteers. You can get resistant varieties. There's a small list of resistant varieties on the resource page for tomatoes that were tested in Seattle. And you can look for specifically blight-resistant tomatoes when you go to a seed seller or a plant seller. Territorial sells plants, and you can look and see if you can get plants that are resistant. Keep the leaves dry and well ventilated, and you can prune your plants. I'll show you how to prune them in a minute. You can remove the leaves from the bottom foot. Once the plant is big, you can take the leaves from the bottom foot so that they're not in contact with the soil, just for other kinds of infections and things like that. And consider watering the soil, not the leaves, and watering in the morning, maybe drip. And you want to rotate. I'll talk about rotation and pruning in a minute. And then we always say, as soon as you move here, get a good recipe for green tomato chutney. We can be a little bit philosophical. I feel like blight is the way my tomatoes give up the ghost in the year. Does anybody have anything else to say about blight? I imagine a lot of us have experience with it. We got nothing. Okay. Well, look, we can. Move on. You can even do this, and a surprising, possibly not surprising, number of people do this. This tomato would have to be really inside the hoop, inside the tent, but this is for photographic purposes. This is a well-ventilated tunnel, but it is going to keep the moisture off the plants for the most part. You can also prune them to make sure that they're not so dense. And you can also prune them so that they go up a trellis. And that might sound silly, but there they are. These are going up a trellis. And we are pruning out any sucker, not any sucker. We're going to prune out, we're going to leave 2 suckers, maybe 1 or 2 suckers. So this is called the axil, or the armpit, as I like to say, of a leaf. Then we have a flower cluster, and just from the leaf axils, we get little sprouts, and those sprouts will grow to look just like this main stem. They'll have leaves and fruit on them, and you can pinch those out so that it's not so dense, and then you can weave the main stem up through the trellis, if you have a trellis. And this trellis here is made of concrete reinforcing mesh. And there is in the March class notes on the resource page, it tells you where to get this. It's not hog panel. Hog panels cost $50 and these cost 10. You might think if we are removing all of this potential growth, that the tomatoes would look sparse. And I think these look kind of sparse, but there are 4 plants right here, and they have had all their suckers removed except for 2, and they're looking pretty good. So the reason we would leave 2 suckers is that in addition to this first stem, this main stem right here, I'm going to let this one grow into another leader. I'd call this a leader. And then I'm going to let this one grow into a leader. I'm going to direct it off this direction through the remesh, and I'm going to weave it through the trellis. And then I'm going to let maybe one up here, or this one, probably one up here, weave through the trellis this way. And so that's what's happened with all of these. They all have 3 leaders, and you can do 2 leaders or whatever. And then every other sucker, I'm going to prune off. And even these suckers that are going to become leaders, they'll get their own suckers, and I've pruned those off as well. But it's still quite a dense stand. Kind of depends on your tomato, on which tomato. So here's a picture. This is a 1-liter tomato, which a lot of commercial growers grow. And this is a 2-liter tomato. That's smaller, but it's being just trained upstream. Does anybody have anything to say about pruning or trellising tomatoes?
What's the 1 liter? What does 1 liter mean?
That means that we took off all of the suckers and only left the main stem. So you get this 1 plant, and it might grow really tall because it's putting all of its energy into this 1 main stem. So you can see that it just has one center right here. So I don't do that. And I do this, but my tomatoes can end up quite bushy and quite productive.
So is there one way that's more productive than another? Is 3 better than 2 and so forth?
I don't know. It varies. I feel like for me, it varies more based on how the summer was around here, whether or not the tomatoes were generally productive. This is from an article that says, look, 1 liter is way better because you get much bigger tomatoes. I have seen people do 1 liter and it was very productive. And I've seen people do 2 or 3 liters and it's very productive. I think if you want larger tomatoes, fewer liters are probably the way to go.
Okay, thanks.
But with more liters, you're going to get more tomatoes. But no matter what, near the end of the season, like sometime in August, I tip every liter because I want them to ripen. I don't want them to be making new babies. Do you do that? Does anybody do that? If we were all in a room, I would see you nodding or not, but I can't tell. So that's another thing that you can do for pruning. So you can leave them unpruned if you want to. I don't mean that you have to do this, but it's just, you know, another arrow in your quiver so you know what to do, what you can do. And you could try it on one of them and see how it goes. A powdery mildew, everybody's seen this, I bet. It hits squashes and legumes around here quite a lot. There's no bringing this leaf back. We'll probably continue to survive, but it's doing photosynthesis less effectively because its sun is blocked. But if we see a couple of spots, we can start spraying our plants with some things that help prevent the germination of more spores. Or you can even at the end of August into September, start spraying every couple of weeks, whether you see it or not, if you want to. You have to spray the tops of the leaves and the bottoms of the leaves. And this is a strange fact. Wouldn't you think that something called mildew would not rely on drought? But this actually likes drought because the spores spread more easily and they stick and can invade much more easily on drought-stressed plants. So think about, I don't know if the experienced growers here have grown squashes, but they don't get it in March, April, and May. They get it in August and September when it's really dry. And peas get it when it's really hot and dry. So making sure that the plant has an appropriate amount of moisture to the roots is really great. If we water the leaves, it doesn't actually increase. It's not the flow of water over the leaves that makes it get powdery mildew, but that humidity that's created can help the powdery mildew. So baking soda, 1 teaspoon in a quart of water, people sometimes find that. The reviews on that are kind of mixed. Some people swear by it. It kind of depends on the year for me. Sulfur is actually found to be less effective, although it's an old cure. There are 2 kinds of bacteria that you can buy, both of them from, well, actually this one is, I'll show you. You can buy this in local nurseries. And I don't like the name complete disease control, but I'll tell you that it is a bacterium that you spray on and it grows and colonizes the leaves and then outcompetes the spores from the fungus. And it also produces chemicals that deter the fungus. You can also get Bacillus subtilis, but the only places I found it, you have to buy large quantities of it. And neem oil has, not consistent results that I've seen from people around here. And it hurts insects, but you could try it. You definitely don't want to do it when there are bees out trying to pollinate your plants. But you do, when you do this, you have to reapply weekly and after rain, and you have to get under the leaves. So if you have big pumpkin plants, you might want to get one of those pump top sprayers with the wand so that you're not down there with like, a little hairspray bottles pumping away. That will wear you out, I think. Does anybody have a powdery mildew cure? Nope. Okay. So abiotic factors are non-living factors. And this one looks like a bacterium or something, but it's not. It's water. It's usually calcium. So it's a calcium deficiency, but not in the plant, just in the tomatoes, or it could be in the plant, but not in the soil. So often there's enough, what I mean is there's enough calcium in the soil and it's just not getting up into the plant. So that's often because of water stress, where it goes a little too dry, then it gets some water, a little too dry, get some water. So some varieties of tomatoes are more prone to this. Some tomatoes will just do this on the first set of tomatoes and then they don't do it again. So it's almost always water stress. It could be, if you're really sure that it's not water stress, you might want to soils test, because too much phosphorus can compete with the calcium and cause a problem, or your pH could be too low or too high. If you have been, you haven't been liming your garden, maybe your pH has gone too low, but it's usually just water consistently and use mulch so that the water doesn't dry out, so that the soil doesn't dry out. And then there are nutrient deficiencies. There are entire, 2-year courses on nutrient deficiencies. So I'll try to give you a little glimpse of it. Nitrogen deficiency usually shows in yellowing of the whole plant, but more in the old leaves, because nitrogen, if you remember from last time, is very mobile. And so the plant says, well, we need to grow some new leaves. Let's take some nitrogen from the old ones. They've had their day, and we'll grow some new leaves. So the old leaves are sometimes more yellow. Sometimes it is the whole plant, especially in a seedling, if it's going kind of yellow. I'm going to go way over here to iron. Iron is less mobile, and it tends to show in yellowing of the leaves, the new leaves. Then phosphorus down here, they get darker, they get bluer, they can get purple. Sometimes nitrogen in a tomato, nitrogen deficiency will show as redness. The leaves will be pale, but there'll be redness underneath, but phosphorus is usually on the upper leaf. And here's the calcium deficiency. Potassium, it gets yellow and crispy around the edges quite often. And magnesium can mimic nitrogen deficiency. It tends to stay green in the middle. So that's my very quick nutrient deficiency hints, but you can always take parts of your plant into the nursery and talk with them about it as well. So in general, we can say that we can take in all of the clues, and we can do that by zooming out first. Like, oh, this plant is looking terrible. Are other plants looking terrible? We're going to zoom out and say, is this happening elsewhere? Is it everything? Is it all the kale, or is it just one plant? Because if it's all of them, it might be nutritional, but if it's one, it's probably something infectious. Is it like physically having a tough time? You accidentally planted it right next to the pathway and it's hardly getting any moisture. And what parts? So we want to look all over the place, not just take one leaf into the nursery. So look at the fronts and the backs and the stems. Sometimes you want to sacrifice a plant if they're really wilting. You want to sacrifice and dig it out. And instead of pulling, you dig, because you want to keep any maggots or whatever that's on there. Sometimes there's a symptom in the stem, so you might want to cut the stem in half. But that would be if you're looking for a particular disease that is described as having, red color inside the stem. Is it the new leaves or the old leaves? And can you see webs or dots, specks, or tiny, tiny bugs? You can get yourself a hand lens and take a look. And you can send a sample to the Washington State University lab. They charge you $40, but it has this little page that you fill out, and it says, what have you been feeding it? And what do you think the problem is? And all kinds of things. And they're very enthusiastic, really sweet people. They're great to talk to. They're a little bit too enthusiastic about the horrible things that happened to my garden, but they're sweet. And if a particular disease is a problem for you, you can plant resistant varieties. So it looks like this. If you're going to plant peas late, and it's very late now, but let's say you want to plant fall peas, and you end up having to put those in like maybe on August 1st to get fall peas. That's a very stressful time for peas. But Maestro is a pretty good one. And the two things we have to be careful of late in the season here are P. enation mosaic virus and powdery mildew. So see these letters? I don't know if you know, but you see these in catalogs a lot, and that's what this plant is resistant to. So if you have a particular problem with like powdery mildew, you can type in cucumber powdery mildew resistant, and it can help you find something. So how do you know what those abbreviations are? You go to disease codes. And this is the good list that I've found is at Johnny's again, and it has all the disease codes. So you can look for PEMV and see what it is. Okay. You can rotate your vegetables. This helps with disease. So it works like this. Let's say you have 4 beds, and we're going to pretend these are the beds. You put everything related to a cabbage in one bed, which includes radishes and arugula and turnips. And everything related to beans and peas in another bed, etc. And potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants are all in this bed. And in this bed, we put the onions and then everything else we could think of because we had to put them somewhere. And so this is 2022, but in 2023, we're going to put the brassicas in that bed and the legumes in that bed. So we're rotating them around our garden. And we don't do this with absolutely every group, but these are the 4 groups that we pay attention to most around here because those are the ones that are more, problem prone. And it helps if you have a little map because you think, oh, I'm going to remember this, but you're not going to remember for 3 years where that sick pea was. Okay, maybe you will. But when I have sick peas, I'm like, oh, was it in the 3rd bed over or the 4th bed? So I make myself a little map and fill it in. And you don't have to keep the peas away from the onions, away from the brassicas. It's just that we group them because it's easier to move them all at once. So you can see here it says, well, what it says, you probably can't read it. It says peas both fall and spring, but this was garlic and onions right here. And so often I put the legumes at the back of another bed, but I do mark where I put them so that I can, especially if they got sick, I can make sure I rotate them. So these are all the groups right here, and this is on the resource page, but you certainly don't have to keep them all separate. It's just that we tend to keep the cabbage and the beans and the onions and the potato family. We tend to keep track of those, but the other ones we're looser with. So we use a minimum 3-year rotation, depending on how you ask. That either means 3 years between planting in the same bed or 2 years between planting in the same bed. But longer is better if you can. And a garden map helps. And if you don't have any room to rotate, you can decide this is the year to add a bed. You can get a really big pot to put that tomato in, or you can rotate with a friend. You can say, my garden is so sick of tomatoes. The soil is tired of tomatoes. How about I do all the you do all the tomatoes and I'll do all the brassicas, or I'll do all the oniony things. And you can make kind of a deal with someone. Now, are there people who never rotate and they get away with it? Yes, there are. I met someone the other day who's had beans in the same place for 18 years. But, it's more of a chance, but I wouldn't want to discourage you if you can't rotate. You can't rotate every 3 years. Go ahead and do it. Rotate what you can. How about mammals? I have advocated this a couple of times. Motion activated sprinklers work well for me. And you might give it a try, especially if you can't fence because you rent or something. The sprinklers should be able to be adjusted for how sensitive they are to motion. In case there's a little breeze, you don't want them going off every 10 seconds. How far out they spray, how high they spray, how far to the left and how far to the right. And they all have an off switch on the back. Now, people asked me a couple of classes ago, which brand? Mine are all Scarecrow except for one Scarecrow brand, but Scarecrow sold the company, I understand, and the reviews are not quite as high as they used to be. So I would just go to, say, a popular online retailer and look at all the options and see what the reviews are like, and then make your choice and make your choice as to where to buy it as well. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be as effective with the many rabbits that are reproducing this year. These I went on at extreme length about in March. So this is Remesh. That's Remesh. And this is not bird netting, it's deer netting. And this is a piece of wood that's across the end to stabilize the mesh at the end. There should be one here to which the netting should be tied so that nothing can get under the end. So the details about this are in the March meeting and the description. It's the second half of the class. And the, where to get it is in the March section of the resource page. So you can do them low like that. So those are my strawberries. I want to keep everything that wants to eat them off. And this is a higher version. So you can make lots of those. John, this is for you. This is for your friend. Does he still have problem with voles? John's busy.
I don't know.
No, okay. Well, if you have this, you have voles. Voles go make tunnels in the grass, not the ground. And they make little tunnels like this. So you can harass them. You can make sure your mulch and your grass are not too thick. You can mow your grass near your vegetable garden. I like grass that's grown because that's longer because it's supportive of wildlife, but right near the vegetable gardens, it can, support wildlife, and that'll be voles. You can put collars of this fabric, this metal fabric. It's called hardware cloth, around the bases of your fruit trees. And you can make yourself a little fence around the base of your peas for it. And when I go to, when there's a cold snap, I think, oh, I've got lots of beets in the garden. I better cover them up with leaves or cardboard. The voles love that because it's cover and they can just sit down there and munch. So sometimes I'll harvest a big bunch of them so I can say, well, these I'll put in the fridge and they won't get these. And then I'll cover with leaves just before the cold, and I'll take the leaves back off after it gets warmer again. And you can put vole repellents in. They are variable in their effectiveness. And I wanted, is Fran here? She's not here. She uses blood meal. And certainly that's a scary smell, mammal blood. So they say that it is effective. And you can trap with rat traps perpendicular to the runs, but usually if you do these other things, I think it controls them pretty well. And poison just kills predators that are going to eat them. So I wouldn't advise that. Does anybody have any vole tips that worked for you? Okay. Well, what I would like to do, that's it for mammals and pests. That's all the downer part of the presentation. I would love to hear from a few people. I would love to hear how you describe yourself as a gardener. Don't be shy. And maybe a sentence about why you describe yourself that way. Do we have any volunteers?
Oh, I can go. I would say experimental.
That's interesting.
And I don't mean that in a good way necessarily. I think that I'm still experimenting and trying to figure out how to grow, where to grow, that sort of thing. So, we'll see this year.
Right. Well, you're a scientist in the face of this uncertainty, right?
Well, I think it's hard because we do travel in the summer. We did put out some drip this year. So I'm hopeful because that tomato with the black hole, because it didn't have the blossom and
yeah, it didn't have the water.
Yeah, that one was us, I think, because we were probably not as consistent watering as we should have been. So hopefully, that will help this year.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't feel condemning, here's what you're doing wrong. Because
I think it makes me feel better that, okay, that's what it is. Because, it is hard when you're starting out to figure out, did I choose the wrong kind? What is. So no, I think it is helpful to look at it and be able to diagnose a bit.
Oh, and it can be baffling. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you so much for that. Who's next? Please, please.
Hi, I'm Carol.
Carol?
I get to see the video, though. I don't know. I can't see myself, so it doesn't matter. Anyway.
I can see you, Carol.
I'd say I'm a learning gardener.
Mhm.
I'm an experienced gardener. I was a master gardener in Georgia, but I am having to relearn a lot of things in the Northwest. And I'm always learning. And I, years ago realized that I would never get everything right, and that's okay. And luckily, we have farmers around if one of my crops fail or whatever. And I just love to garden. That's, and
that's so great.
So thank you. This is great to learn more from you. So I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, at least the carrot rust fly. Welcome to carrot rust fly land. Yeah, and the more experience you get at anything, the less of a disaster each thing is, I think. You get more philosophical, like, okay, yeah, that failed, but it doesn't define you like it did the first year that you grew stuff, I feel.
That's true.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Carol.
you.
Who else? We have another one? You don't have to do it, but if anybody else wants to share, that would be great. Okay. John, how would you describe yourself?
Funny you should ask. I was just kind of thinking about that. Let's see. I've always been kind of the hole digger, and you know, lifting the heavy things and big wheelbarrows full of stuff and dumping it here and dumping it there. But it's
Mhm.
just been the last couple of years where I've really been interested in what are we planting? How are we making it grow? How can we grow more? How can we make it grow bigger, faster? You know, just all this sort of stuff, and yet still maintain an organic garden.
Yeah, right. There are limitations, aren't there? But there are also this kind of, it also opens you up to that whole ecosystem. It's kind of neat.
Which
Well,
we've been
thank you,
adding
thank
to.
you.
We've been adding to slowly every year. I really get more into the mulching, composting, that sort of stuff. And we got mason bees this year, so I'm pretty excited. Each year we try to add something something new to make it just a little better.
Neat. That's great. Thank you, the three of you, for sharing. That's really great. Makes it feel a little bit more like we're in a room together. And maybe I'll ask later, maybe we can get some more people to share if you're willing. And I think I'll ask every time just to get some sharing. John, should we do 5-minute break?
Yeah, I'll set my clock.
Okay, we're going to do 5 minutes. I'll see you back here at what we'll read. For me, it is 8:08. John, may I ask you a question? I don't have a feedback form this time intentionally because I've had a lot of feedback. But if people want to be on the mailing list for the next class and the other opportunities, could they email? I could just tell them to email me directly, right?
If you're comfortable putting your email in the chat box, everybody would have your email. Or I could put it in there for you.
Well, that would be lovely. Thank you. Or I can do it, either one.
Just put it in there.
Thank you. Thanks so much for, and yeah, I have to remember to actually mention that when they come back. Yeah. Thanks for running around town and doing all the publicity.
Oh yeah, I love talking about growing food now. You turned me into an acolyte.
Oh,
Proselytizing
that's
everyone I see.
You're sweet. Oh, time's up, isn't it? We're 1 minute past, it looks like. Okay, we're back. I hope we're back. John has put my email in the chat because I send out email to everybody to remind about the class happening for the next month, and also whenever I find opportunities for food growing. So this last time I sent out a lot about fruit because some people had asked about growing fruit, and this is Veg Club, but I want to give you the resources, and we had great opportunities. So there'll be other various opportunities. Maybe there's a sale of plant starts or something like that. So if you have not given me your email in a feedback form before, maybe you're new, maybe you just didn't include it, but you'd like to be included, you could grab my email right now and write me an email that you'd like to receive the mailings. It's like, well, it's supposed to be 1 or 2 in a month, but then I make a mistake. So I have to send you the erratum. Yeah, so I would love to do that for you. And if you have any questions, if anybody has any questions about your specific garden or about my presentation, then go ahead and email me about that. That's perfectly fine. So now we're going to talk about the beautiful bugs that are on our side, because try this little quiz. What % of insects in the world are harmful to humans or to agriculture? Pick a percentage. It is, what do you think, John? Ed McMahon? Oh, I don't see it. What % do you think?
I'm going to say 7%.
7%. Good guess. That's probably what I would guess. It's 1%. So they are mostly either benign or always they're a super important part of the ecosystem. And the ones that you're looking on this at the screen right now are actually predatory. They're not just pollinators, but they are predators. So this tachnid fly on the left-hand side looks like a housefly, right? And they're going to spread disease because houseflies definitely do that. But tachnid flies, they just eat pollen and nectar. And they do another thing that really helps us, that actually helps us, and that is that their babies get ingested by pest insects. And the babies then, gruesomely, eat the pest insect from the inside out. So do you see that the tachnid flies behind is bristly? Tachnid flies come in different shades and slightly different shapes and things, but they usually have that bristly hind end. And the larva, I just found one of these in my garden, I hope it was a tachnid, it looks like this down in the corner. Acumen wasps doesn't have a massive stinger. It's not a stinger at all. It is an ovipositor so that she can lay eggs inside of pest organisms, and they kill the pest organisms. This trichogramma wasp, I saw these today on my dandelions. That's a reason to leave the dandelions. They're one of the few things that's producing nectar right now. These things are like 3 millimeters long. They're so tiny you wouldn't notice them. That is an insect egg that she's up against, and she's tapping it to see how big it is. So she knows how many of her babies to lay inside of it so that they can eat it. So they're around us and we don't see it. I think maybe you're looking at them, but I just want to look at them more and more. These, we had a ton of these a couple of years ago, great golden digger wasps. They look kind of menacing. They are not interested in hurting you. They feed their babies larvae, as do yellow jackets and all the other ones that I mentioned before. These down here are called devil's coach horses. They're a kind of beetle. And these beetles live under the mulch in your yard, not the heavy mulch, but like leaf mulch or underneath ground cover, alyssum, that kind of thing. If you pull something up, you might see one scurrying away. They eat a lot of things, but one of the things they eat is slugs, little slugs. Yep, sorry about that. Back up we go. This guy, see that snout? It helps him destroy, these are white fly that he's destroying. And a centipede, when you pull the tarp off your compost and a centipede runs away, keep in mind that is a predator. That's a predator animal roving around looking for things to eat. Even these guys, who are not very attractive, this is a mite, and I would think, oh, mites are bad, but this mite eats the mites that eat your plant. So, and there are assassin bugs. See that little spike? That little spike pierces the bodies of pest insects. This is not a bee. This is a hoverfly. Bees have 2 sets of wings, and they have different eyes. And these adults eat pollen and nectar, as do a lot of the adults that we're looking at. They eat pollen and nectar, but the babies, here's a baby hoverfly. Would you think that thing was a baby hoverfly? That looks green. I think that thing is probably going to eat my plants, but it's not. It eats aphids and other things. And if you're trying to memorize, like I sometimes want to memorize what the insect looks like. Okay, all assassin bugs look like this. Well, they don't necessarily. They vary. They vary by age, and they vary by where they are. And there are lots of different kinds of, for example, ecumen wasps. And from the previous page, there are lots of different appearances. So I just keep in mind that 1% of insects are bad for my plants or for me. So an example of how different they can look is, you see this really weird looking one? This is a baby one of these. Isn't that cool? I think they're beautiful and creepy looking. This big-eyed bug is a predator as well. So another emphasis to show you how different things can look is, I don't know, maybe a lot of us know this, but these are baby ladybugs. These are first instars and second instar of ladybugs. And this is the pupa of the ladybug. And this is a great thing to show kids, I think, to help them understand that things that might look menacing aren't necessarily menacing. I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. These are lacewings, brown ones and green ones, or as I call them, the pretty ones and the not pretty ones. These are their little cocoons, and these are their babies. And that looks kind of menacing, but it is only menacing to aphids. They're going to help us. And we can buy things. You can buy ladybugs and lacewings and things like that, but if your environment doesn't support them, then what are they going to do? So we want them around. We want them around before our pest insects show up. So we need to support them with foods that they can eat before the pest insects show up. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. I'd like to introduce this concept of biophobia, because a lot of these are kind of scary looking. And it is increasing because our kids are having less interaction with the natural world. A lot of kids aren't. That's a lot of the reason that people are in the Pacific Northwest, is because they like the outdoors. But anything we can do to help with that makes our citizenry better informed, and it helps us grow food, and it helps us support food growing environments and environmental decisions. So you can have an aversion to, insects. People are afraid of all insects, or there's a pond across from Sportsman Club and it's covered in this little stuff called, this stuff up here, it's called duckweed. And it's a little plant with 4 leaves and a root. You can argue about it, but it has an ecological role there, but it's not slimy, but people sometimes see it as that slimy pond. And we can fight biophobia if you want to. I'm just offering you an option. By these things, you can model this for maybe your kids, or maybe your grandkids, or maybe the person who gardens right next to you in the pea patch who's trying to kill things off. Excuse me. We can prioritize understanding, especially of things that we're grossed out by. Basically, we disdain them. Ew, they're dirty or something like that. Maybe it's in us. I think we all have a little bit of it. You can take kids on safaris, or yourself, to look for things in rotting logs and under holes and things like that, and go to the bug zoo in Bremerton. And just if an Icumon wasp lands on your arm, don't panic. And then you can just say, look at this cool thing. You can bring a larva in from the garden and say, look what I found, how lucky I was to find this thing. And when a kid I have a 4-year-old who I hang out with, and I say to her, that's okay, you don't have to be nearby. I'm just going to be hanging out over here with these things. And she kind of sidles her way up because she's curious. Then she can see me not freaking out. So you can, the last part I like, be patient, but don't procrastinate. So we can provide these opportunities to ourselves or our kids or whatever, and the patience comes with their response. We can be patient about their response, but provide them frequent opportunities. So I just wanted to let you, I wanted to reflect on the power of you as a gardener and what you can do. So how do we convince predatory insects to stay in our gardens? Well, 70% of predatory insects are ground nesters, and the other 30% are cavity nesters. So the ground nesters actually need bare ground, which is this thing you're never supposed to do in the Northwest because we have all this rain. So a little bare ground is actually helpful for them. And it doesn't have to be like stripped bare, but I have an area that's like, it's got salal planted in it from a previous homeowner, and it's not the happiest. So it has a lot of exposed soil, and it's off in a hot corner. But I think ground nesters are quite happy over there. And when we hear ground nesting, we think yellow jackets. Like, that's the last thing I'd want, is to walk over a yellow jacket's nest. But a lot of these ground nesters are just completely harmless. So I'm not saying you should leave a yellow jacket nest right where you're going to drag the hose over it. But if you have an out of the way place to leave, it can be helpful. And you can also grow things with pithy stems, like raspberries. Roses have pithy stems. Leave tubes for them. I don't advocate growing bamboo. But there are a lot of plants that have empty stems, and you can cut them and then hide them away so that cavity nesters can use them. Here's a picture of, this is a harmless but very helpful bee, and this is where they nest. That's how they nest in the ground. So these are all things that we can do to promote predatory insects. We can plant natives and non-natives in bug banks. So those are basically flower beds, or like, you can even have them like a hedgerow in multiple places. It's nice to have a big one in one place and then little ones elsewhere. So in your pea patch, you could propose that strip that everybody's always, frustrated with out by the road gets a bug bank treatment, and you can put in flowers there that attract them, plants that attract them, and then have other patches. And that's good because they go back and forth then, and they have to go like over your garden to get to the other places, and they might help you in your garden. You can have a variety of plants by when they flower. So they flower early and they flower late. And the shape of the flower is really important. And then the height, is it a perennial? Does it have woody stems? That kind of thing. Bare ground, of course, I already said, go raspberries for pithy stems and things. You can plant a dead tree. You can, I may just mean put a stump in your yard or leave the stump in your yard, because there are wood boring ones that will use that. So wild places, wild areas, even weeds, things that we think are weeds are natives. Dead wood, leaf litter, don't use pesticides when you can avoid it. I mean, I would just say don't use pesticides. You can give them clean water in a very shallow bowl or put some flat rocks in it so that they can edge up to the water without drowning. And then you can leave your dead pithy stems even in from perennials that come back. I had perennials grow a foot tall and kind of surround the pithy stems, but it's been so cold. I was pretty sure that those dwellers in there that were overwintering in there were not coming out. So they're still there on some of those plants, and I can just reach down into the plant and snip it off. It's really not a problem. And you can grow ground covering plants, because those beetles that I showed you, they love to live under there, and they're waiting. And then at night, they're crawling around eating pest insects. So what do we plant? Umbels is one of the things we can plant. So these all look like umbrellas. Umbel comes from the same word as umbrella. So they're flat faced, and they have little tiny, not deep flowers. So you see these flowers are tubular. They're making pollen and nectar. And the reason they're important is if you're a kind of a wasp that goes around and gets insects to take home to feed your babies, you have to have a mouth that can pinch an insect, right? And then can chew it up. And when those insects aren't there, you're going to eat pollen and nectar. So you have to have a mouth that can also grind pollen and lap up nectar. You're not going to have a specialized mouth like a butterfly would have that has a tongue that can go way down a tube flower. You won't have that. So you have this mouth that can do lots of things pretty well. So you need a flat little flower that just presents that nectar so you can get right in there, because you don't have that proboscis straw that you can put into a tube. So that is why we want these umbelliferous flowers. That's one of the reasons. Excuse me. So these are different kinds of umbels that we can do. Some are tall, some are less tall. You can do daisy flowers, daisy family. They have similar nectar and pollen in the middle. If you get sunflowers and you get the teddy bear kind, or if the description says great for florists because it's pollenless, that's not what you want. You want the kind that produce pollen. These are short. These are can be pretty short, and these are tall, of course. These are about 2 feet, 2.5 feet tall. If you're wondering, and you can cut these back so they'll grow shorter. We can also grow natives. Yarrow is one of those umbels, and there's a native yarrow that you can get in seed from native, John, I'm not sure it's on the resource page, but I should put it there. It's like the native meadow nursery or something. It's specific to the Northwest. And I will put it on. They have yarrow seeds for wild ones, and in tests, the wild yarrow attracts and supports a lot more natives. This fringe cup is actually all in our woods right now. The one that we have is not, this is a cultivated variety. The one we have is a little bit smaller, and the fringe is not bright pink, it's greenish, and it just grows up. It's these little spikes. If you go hiking, they're just all over the place. Queen Anne's lace, I always think, oh, that's kind of a nasty weed, but it's just a wild carrot. It's literally the same genus. And Oregon grape is good. Excuse me, for early blooming to support them. What else? Oh yeah, these are also good. Great time to develop a cough. Thyme has a lot of little flowers, a lot of herbs that you can grow. If your herb garden will support a lot of these pollinators, but they tend to bloom later. So it's nice to have other things that bloom early. Buckwheat can make you a bug zoo. It's really beautiful. Phacelia is so attractive to bees, and that if you plant a big bank of Phacelia, it's possible they won't pollinate your garden. So you want to just put a little Phacelia in. Alyssum is great for cover and food, The beetles love to go underneath it, and the winter it dries to a straw that continues to provide a little bit of cover. Which I think that's pretty cool. So these are the things, excuse me, a lot of the plants that we can do, we can use. What I wonder from you is, what do you notice attracts a lot of insects? Not, not necessarily, definitely, I'd love to know if it attracts butterflies, but what attracts insects that might possibly be predatory insects? Does anybody have anyone that you notice? I noticed late in the season that oregano, they're just nuts for the oregano, and everybody's on there. You can also attract toads and frogs and snakes and songbirds. So we want cover for the songbirds. We want multi-level garden edging if you're going to have non-food plants. And toads and frogs they like cover, they like stones with gaps in between them so they can hide in there. Every time I break a bowl in the kitchen that now has a divot out of the side of it, I just turn it over in the garden. They like a water source. And I'm going to suggest that maybe we invite snakes, because nobody else is going to suggest this to you. So snakes, little snakes that we have around here eat slugs. And so you can protect them. Whoops, sorry about that. You can protect them by walking your lawn before you mow or string trim, because they don't perceive the vibrations of the string trimmer the same way we do, apparently, and we can end up strimming them accidentally. We can provide habitat. If you have room, you can just put wide boards, or somebody a couple days ago said cardboard works, or metal with a space underneath it, so that they can hide under there. You can have unmown snake-like pathways. If there's grass, they love that cover. They're not going to come out across your driveway necessarily every day, right, to visit your garden. So they like to have some cover, and don't use pesticides. And if you have pets, unfortunately, and they're running around the yard, it makes it harder, but you can always just exclude them from that particular area. These are two really good books if you want to know about attracting beneficial bugs to your garden. They're really engaging. This one's written by an entomologist. This one's written by a horticulturalist, but they're very engaging books. And in the resource page, I have 2 links, one for each of these books, so that you can go to KRL right now, Kitsap Regional Libraries, and reserve them, or you can call your local bookstore. So that is the end of my presentation. And I would like to ask if anybody has anything to say about attracting beneficial insects, anything that's worked for you, what you've done. Let me see what I've done. I'm going first because I like to talk, I guess, while you're thinking about it. I have a place that I had to abandon because of a neighbor's tree was shading it. And at first I thought, oh, well, I'll have to put flowers in there. I'll have to. But it's this great opportunity. Now I have this great spot for a bug bank. And I love that. And I put alyssum in because it grows everywhere. You'll only have to plant it once, but it's very easy to pull out. Does anybody else have anything else? Would anybody like, oh, John?
We did an herb garden behind our patio a while back. Mm-hmm. And so you're right. You mentioned the oregano. It's everybody. It's a party. It's party central.
They're just nuts, right?
Yeah, for all the pollinators. Yeah. And so we do thyme, basil. I'm trying to think of what else Barrett has out there, because I don't remember the names of the stuff. I usually have to pull it and smell it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But they're very happy about it. And rosemary blooms really early. So that's nice. it's a good support for early on. And the point of that, I think I was clear before, but just in case I wasn't, we want them to be able to subsist on that so that if we get an infestation, they can then move over and get that protein from the garden, because they definitely want protein. And did you know plants have a lot of, you know what an extrafloral nectary is? It's nectar producing spot on the plant outside of the flower. Those are specifically to entice protective insects to come to them in case they get insects. And when they get infested with insects, they produce more of that, and it changes, the chemistry is changed so that they send out chemical signals to the insects that please come now, I have a problem. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Wow. I have a question, Carol. You mentioned plant raspberries. And so
Mhm.
would you recommend not cutting down the old brambles after the season's over and wait until the next year?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the fruit expert, but from the perspective of supporting these guys, yes. And if it's not brambles that you're growing, then it could be that you wait to cut back your Joe Pye weed that's pithy inside, or other plants that you know that are pithy or that have hollow stems, just to leave them. And I left them really late. I mean, they really needed it this year. You can go outside and think the bugs aren't coming out yet. I mean, they maybe this week they are, but 2 weeks ago they certainly weren't. Does that answer that, Carol?
Yeah, I just, because you had mentioned specifically raspberries, so I wondered if there was something about, it's just that they have
Oh,
a
yeah.
hollow-
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks
Yeah.
for clarifying that. No, I was just trying to make that shorthand for pith.
Right. No, that's helpful though.
Yeah.
I mean, because I always thought you need to cut them down when they're done producing, but you don't. You're right.
Well, and people who specifically grow for these insects maybe have other priorities as well, right? You're either optimizing for the insects or for the raspberries. So you may want to choose another plant, I guess, that's also pithy. But if you can leave it and they're equally healthy, then yeah, you can just reach in there and cut them down, cut them back when it's appropriate. Would anybody else be willing to describe how they see themselves as a gardener? What word you would use to describe and why? Okay. Are you sure? Okay. Well, another time then. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everybody who shared. I really appreciate it and asked questions and things. That was great. And I'm glad that you're here. If you have any other questions, please email me, or you can email John and he'll pass them on, or maybe it's a John question and you can go straight to him. Anything else from you, John?
A couple of volunteer opportunities. The Fruit Club was going to do a demo on was it last Saturday, the 7th?
Uh-huh.
And that's been changed to the 14th. So they rescheduled that from the 7th to the 14th. And then June the 5th, those of you who are supporters of Friends of the Farm may already get this information. They're doing the food forest off of Charles, which is off of Lovegren. They bought the property and they want to turn it into basically a walking buffet. And we've been pulling blackberries and Scotch broom and ivy out of there. We had a big work party. So it's June 5th, 10 to 1, and you will get fed by a gourmet cook if you come.
Yeah, she's amazing, right?
Yes. When we were done pulling, Heather, who's the director of Friends of the Farm, showed up with a bunch of baskets and set out a spread that was, oh my goodness, it was amazing. So yeah, come support Friends of the Farm and the Food Forest on June the 5th.
Yay, thank you so much. I think I just posted that information. I think I just entered it. There you go. That is all of that right there. You could do a screenshot really fast and get all of this. There's a plant sale on the 14th at the pruning demo is also a plant sale. Did you say that? I was getting distracted trying to find this information.
I did not.
Yeah. And Pulsebow the Pulsebow tree board is going to do a summer tree pruning demo in the summer in June, July. Yeah, it says July. So I already sent that out. So this is the kind of information that you can get. And you can also get veg gardening related information. Yeah.
So we'll do this again next month. Mark it on your calendars, tell your friends. Would love to have everybody come.
Yeah, next month we're going to talk about how to extend your growing so that you can harvest through the winter and have food all winter long. Yeah. And oh, I have one more request. Okay, we're never leaving, but the one more request is that if you have a topic, I did feedback forms in the past and I said I'm not doing it this time, but if you have a topic that you haven't mentioned in a previous feedback form that you would like, I would love to hear about that. And a couple of people said they were interested in irrigation. I'm trying to work on irrigation. I know it's like getting to the time when you need that irrigation. I'm trying to get reliable information about irrigation because I'm not an irrigation expert, but I will at least send you to resources that can help you. And I might have people who can help talk to us too. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Meridel. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carol. Bye-bye.